Okay, in my last video talking about maps and map functions, I was looking at the talk map, this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move to the next one in the sequence as this file runs. By sheer luck, the people who wrote this particular file have left the maps in what seems like a sensible order to talk about them, so I don't need to jump about inside the file, which at the moment is quite handy. This one is what most people call the smoke map, and I prefer to call it limitation of injection quantity. There's very often two of these maps. One is injection quantity limited by MAF, or the amount of air available, and the other one is injection quantity limited by MAP, or the manifold absolute pressure. As you can see, or maybe you can't see, depends on how well you're beginning to learn these, but very often there's another one there, and that would be the MAP, MAP, the one for manifold absolute pressure. It might be there, it might be here. There is a chance that this is the waste space that could have been that map. You can't know, because obviously unless you know exactly what that map is or what it was intended to be, you can't know for sure. Right, so okay, so this is our limiting map. Now we've already had 70 milligrams injected. That was our request by the driver's wish. We just saw it was injected. If you looked at the last video, it was restricted to 52 milligrams by the talk map. So 70 has already become 52. So whether you like it or not, that's what it's become. So let's have a look at this one then. So we'll open it. It's popped open in 2D view. Now again, it depends how comfortable you feel when you look at these maps. It's very difficult to explain anything in 2D view, obviously. In 3D view, it's not too bad explaining what's going on, but it does mean that I can't point out the values very easily. I'm not 100% sure whether that matters or not. I'll stick with 3D view for a minute, and if we decide, or I decide, that that's not helpful, I'll go back to the text view. Okay, now what we've got is we've got engine speed and airflow, and then up here we've got injection quantity. So the output is injection quantity. So let's have a look at what the maximum it will let me have is. Oh, well, it's not too bad, is it? Look, what we've got here is it's letting me have 58, 57.85, 58 roughly, 50. So I'm getting somewhere around about 55, 56, 57, 58. So that's not too bad. And as I come down this way, and again, I'm going to ignore engine speed over here. I'm just going to worry about mass airflow. As I come down and the engine gets less and less air, then I can inject less fuel. So it's all making perfect sense in that sense, isn't it? If I want to inject, I'll stop at that point. Let's see if I can get that one. That one's showing me 21.3. So it's injecting 21.3 milligrams, and it's telling me that I want 400 milligrams of mass airflow. Now, we've had a look at that. I think I would prefer to explain this on the text one. It's a little bit easier because the numbers are right there in front of us. And I think I'm going to ignore the revs per minute. I think I'm just going to talk us through what's going on here. Now, okay, so there's the airflow. We've got a maximum of 1050. The EGR valve gave us a maximum of 850. But that doesn't matter. Don't worry about the fact that these don't match completely, because that makes no difference whatsoever to the way the whole thing works. As long as the designers have taken it all into account while they've been designing the maps, that doesn't actually make any difference. Right, now let's go and pick somewhere where we think the numbers might be meaningful to us. Now, we've seen 52 milligrams, somewhere over here, being injected, and we've seen 70. Well, we're not going to get 70 here, are we? We've got 58. So somewhere in this area would be a good place to look. What I'll do is I'll pick the 58. Now I'm going to highlight this, hopefully just to make it look easier to see. If it isn't easier to see, obviously then it's not helpful. Okay, now let's have a look at what's going on then. What's this telling me? I've got 18 that's 18 milligrams of fuel, and up here I've got 300. Hopefully that's 300 milligrams of air. So basically what this map is telling me is that I'm going to need 300 milligrams of air to burn my 18 milligrams of fuel. Now, it doesn't actually matter if that's exactly right or not exactly right, because the designers have made that calculation for me. And so what they're saying is that if the engine, so if 300 milligrams is available, then the ECU should restrict the amount of fuel injected to 18. So it's actually saying to itself, I've got this much air flowing through, so this is the amount of fuel I can burn. And it varies slightly with revs, because look, here it's still about 18 and there it's still about 18, but right down here I'm allowed a little bit more. Right up here I'm allowed a little bit less. But I'm not going to worry too much about that, because the same system applies more or less at all revs. So I'm just going to talk about one rev at the moment. So okay, so if I then try to speed the engine up, well, when I do manage to inject a little bit more fuel, that will give me a few more revs. And when I've got a few more revs, I will then get a little bit more air. So I've got a few more revs, so I'm now getting a bit more air, so 350. So now I can inject 19.4. So can you see where we're going with this? So by the time we get up here, and I've got enough revs to comfortably get 850, or maybe a little bit more, but let's pick 850. Once I get up here, I can now inject 44.6 milligrams per stroke of fuel. Now you can see where this 58 might not be 58, because we've seen already that the torque map was restricting to 52, and of course it's just possible that this is as well, isn't it? Because there it's 49.9, but if it's about here that the airflow peters out, if I can't get much more air than this through the mass airflow meter, then I won't get much more than this injected. So if I can't get 1050 through, then I won't be able to inject 58 milligrams per stroke. And so here we are limiting IQ, and the limiting factor is the mass airflow. If I don't have more air, I can't have more fuel. And again, that helps protect the engine, the turbo, the gearbox, the clutch and everything else, and the environment, and more importantly these days the environment, because otherwise we're just going to either pour out unburnt fuel, so we're going to get lots of white smoke, or more likely we will probably get lots of black smoke because we will have incomplete burning of the fuel. And so what this map does is in effect limit the amount of black smoke that comes out of the exhaust, and that's why most people call it the smoke map, because what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of smoke that comes out the back of the engine. Now, just as an aside, it's worth mentioning at the moment about where these figures come from. Somewhere around about 450 to 500, that's the amount of air that a 2 litre engine or a 1.9 litre engine will be pulling into the cylinders each time it turns over. Because remember, you are creating a sort of suction effect and sucking in a cylinder's worth of air, and a cylinder's worth of air is about 500. So when we get up here and we're nearer 850, 900, 1000, when we get to this area, the reason that we've got to that area is very simple. It's roughly 2 times 450 or 2 times 500. In other words, this is a turbocharger which is giving us roughly twice air pressure. So that's what's happening up here. So when these figures change from about 450 and go up towards 1000, these are the turbocharger. If your turbocharger stops working, you will be stuck in this area. It's quite possible, though, you will carry on trying to inject larger values of fuel, at least until the ECU manages to find a way of stopping you, and you will get lots of black smoke pouring out the back of the car and very little power. The turbocharger isn't working. So that's what this map is all about. It's got a little bit of turbocharger built in the sense that these values only exist if the turbocharger is running. Okay, I'll just get rid of that because it drives me nuts. I will just click on that to get rid of it, and I'll stop there.